Welcome. Today we're talking with Diane Parham. She is the Chief Financial Officer at AUX, a CUSO that provides a robust suite of credit union back office services such as accounting and compliance. Diane, welcome, and thank you for joining us at Credit Union Digest.
Thanks, Larry. I'm excited to be here.
Great. All right. Well, let's get started. Diane, what are the key challenges for credit unions going into 2023?
There's a couple of really significant challenges out there for the industry. One for certain is that the challenge to find the right talent to fit your credit union. This is something we see every day. There's a lot of employees out there who maybe have worked in other industries, but they're just not familiar with the credit union industry. And it's very unique and it's very important to have someone who really understands how credit unions work. When we're on the accounting side, we hear a lot that everything is backwards, and it is. Your deposits are liabilities. The cash sitting there is a liability. That's a different scenario than you're going to see at most places. So, finding someone who can really understand how transactions occur, how they flow through the general ledger, and both accounting and compliance, the need to have skilled workers is real. You can't jump into compliance straight out of college and understand the regs, understand how they apply, understand how they apply specifically to each individual credit union. It's a really, really unique industry that requires a great deal of talent. And I think that's a difficult thing to find these days. Employees have more power than they've had in the past. COVID kind of changed things, that the great resignation, and employees feel kind of empowered to demand a few things these days, and that's okay. But a lot of those demands are, I want to work from home. I don't want to go to the office every day, and maybe I don't even want to go to the office 3 days a week. So it's a unique challenge when you have a front-facing business, you have members you need to serve. They're going to come into your lobby. Somebody needs to be there. A lot of times if you're saying my front office has to be in the office, it makes sense to say my back office needs to be there too. That's what makes sense for your credit union, but it may not be what your employees are demanding right now. So it's really a struggle that we see quite frequently is, they either the talent isn't there just because it's a unique industry, or the talent's there, but they really want to work from home in their jammies, and can you blame them? It's a pretty good deal. So, but also it's a different rate environment than we've seen for a while. Right now, rates are rising, and does your credit union have someone on staff who's seen that before? It's a unique environment, really. We've seen them fall. We all understand how that works. But what happens when they're rising? A lot of focus is put on the loan side and making sure that we have loan rates that are matching our competitors to make sure that we can get the loans in-house. But are we really focusing on the full net interest margin? Are we looking at the deposit side and saying, do our deposits match? Do we want to attract more deposits? And if so, what's the term? Do we just want short-term deposits? Do we want CDs? And that needs to match with what you're doing on your lending side. Are you really pushing for mortgages? Then maybe you don't want to attract regular shares. Maybe you want to look more at a CD promotion to kind of match the terms on those. So really understanding your balance sheet and how it all interplays together is really, really important right now. It's a pretty significant need for literally every credit union in this industry. And they may or may not have people who've been in this position before, or just understand the holistic approach and have time to come out and think strategically, because a lot of our credit unions are smaller. So, you may have a CEO that really did run the teller line so that their employees could go to lunch. So if you're running the teller line every day, do you have time to sit back and think about, your ALM, and do you really have a good match for deposits and loans? And are you going after the right loan categories? It takes time to really pull yourself out of that day to day. And that's a real struggle for a lot of people in our industry, just because they're having to wear so many hats. So I think just fighting those two battles in 2023 is probably, it's a handful for sure for our industry. So.
Great, great. Thank you, Diane. Your point about the holistic is very, very important. And I understand that AUX provides services for accounting and compliance. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about those CFO services.
We do. We have a really unique program, I think, that was designed to fit really the heart of what the issue is for our industry. We have a lot of smaller credit unions in our industry that provide amazing service to their members. They know their members when they walk through the door. And all of that really takes a lot more effort and intention than people may realize. And what you're ignoring potentially on the backside of that is really not, the focus you need to place on your back office services. Do you have the right strategies and the right tools in place to meet the demands that you need for the regulators? So that those are two pretty different buckets. So our CFO services was designed to be a fractional CFO. You may not need someone full time to come in and sit in your office every single day and just work through, making sure the books are clean, making sure they're closed on time, getting your call reports filed. That may not be a full-time job at your credit union, but you need it. You need to make sure that you're developing strategies for the long term to ensure the longevity of your credit union. You need to be looking out 3 to 5 years and forecasting and anticipating challenges and anticipating how you could respond to those challenges. So those things do take time, but you may not need them for 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year. You may just need a couple hours a month to focus on that. So we've really designed this program to have experienced CFOs that can come in and just take a different look at your books, a third party look, and just say, hey, does this make sense? Where when you're going through your day to day and you're plowing through everything, you may not have time to look at everything at an individual level and say, does this make sense? So that's what we really try to do with this product, is make sure that we're managing liquidity actively. You cannot be passive with your liquidity. We can't have $10 million sitting in a corporate account, just, hanging out. We need to make sure that we're putting that money to good use. We're getting the biggest bang for the buck that we can get, so we can return that to our members. So really managing liquidity, forecasting out what liquidity is going to be, forecasting out different ways to match your investments with, it may make sense for your credit union to borrow. It's a thing that, people are kind of shy away from. We don't want to borrow, but it may make sense. If you can borrow some funds from your corporate and you can put them out at a higher rate and you can match those terms, it's almost like free money. That's as close as you can get to free money if you can really match that up and make sure you have an intentional approach to it. So we really try to focus on looking out on the deposit side. Do you have certificates that are going to mature? Maybe you had a huge certificate offering 5 years ago and it's coming to fruition. And what's going to happen to all of those dollars? Do you want to keep them? Do you want them to run off? You need to be asking yourself those questions in advance of events happening, so you know what your reaction is. You've planned for it. You understand the consequences, no matter what action you take. You understand what you're doing and why you're doing it and how it's going to benefit your members. And I just think that's really hard to do when you're running a branch and you're, dealing with HR issues every day. We all know every single employee in this industry probably puts on 10 different hats a day. So we try to just take this off of their plates and focus on it and make it an intentional approach that we can just, take a couple hours out of the month for the CEO to sit down with us and really talk through these, and then we can formulate a plan, and we're all on the same page, and we're going to benefit the credit union that way. Just taking a, look from maybe 30,000 feet that they don't have the opportunity to do every day.
Great, great. Thanks, Diane. You know, your point about the fractional utilization of these CFO and other forecasting and analytic services sounds great. So when credit unions come to AUX, what is the situation of the problem as they would describe it to you?
A lot of times it's really that they've had a long-term employee who's been fantastic and they want to retire, or they've already retired. And if you have this key person risk, you have it at every company, right? But when you have a smaller employee base, that becomes a very real issue very quickly. So if you've had someone who's been there 20 years, who knows compliance, and maybe they know accounting too, and they probably know how to run the teller line and they know how to market, and they just retire one day, how do you fill that hole? You probably have an employee that is filling the needs of 3 to 4 different employees. So, how do you go out there and find someone who can fill in those shoes and has all the corporate knowledge and can just step in and keep things going? That's a very, very real challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think this fractional need comes in. You need a little bit of everything. So how can you get just a little bit without paying for a full-time accountant and a full-time risk officer and, full-time employee in all these different areas?
Right.
But a lot of times it is, that they've had someone leave and they've worked really hard to hire. They've spent months interviewing and recruiting, and they think they found the right person, and it just doesn't work out. They hired him from a different industry, and they didn't really understand the books or have the opportunity to train with someone at the credit union. So you see that talent shortage, and you can really only let that go for a little bit before it becomes a very serious situation, whether it's accounting or compliance. So these things keep CEOs up at night for sure. And if we can do a little bit to help in that and just chip away at those worries so people start sleeping at night, that's really our goal, is to just jump in and help where the help is needed. If you have a great accounting staff and you need just compliance help, we think that's fantastic. We are very happy that you have found the right talent in your accounting team. And vice versa, we just want to make sure we kind of fill in the gaps to keep this industry strong and to really help our smaller credit unions that struggle every day. And, that's what kind of keeps us going every day for sure.
Great. Thank you. So client calls you about one of these situations. And so how does AUX go about meeting its clients' accounting and compliance needs? How do you go about that?
There's a lot of communication for sure that needs to happen. Every credit union is different. Specifically on the accounting side, every transaction is going to run through the GL differently. You have different core systems. They just route them through different GLs differently. So we really need to dig in and go through the books and come up with our questions and meet on a very regular basis with our clients, because, we're coming in and we're looking at things differently, which can be good, but it also just raises more questions. So, we're coming back and saying, do you understand why this is happening? Because it doesn't make sense to us, but maybe it makes perfect sense to the credit union. So there's a lot of back and forth communication that needs to happen, much like it would with your employee if we were in-house. But you just sit down for an hour. It's not all day. It's not questions coming in all day as if they're, sitting across the hall from you in a desk. We try to make sure that we're really intentional and efficient about how we're asking and when we're asking, to make sure that we're not wasting anyone's time. So communication is absolutely the key. And on our side, what becomes really vital is to make sure that we are hiring credit union talent, to make sure that we have employees that really understand how it should happen in a credit union, because we can't expect a CEO of a credit union to understand every aspect to the most minute detail. And that's why they've come to us. That's our job. We need to make sure that we understand it down to what happened when the member made this deposit, or they wanted to stop pay on this check. What really occurred in the system, and did it work properly?
Right.
We need to make sure we're hiring that experience to be able to ask the right questions and not, go down these rabbit holes.
Great. Well, thank you, Diane. Appreciate you spending time today with Credit Union Digest and discussing how credit unions can address the continuing talent challenges and better manage the impacts of higher interest rates that we're now seeing. So again, thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity. This has been wonderful. We always enjoy talking about the credit union industry. So thank you.
Great, great. So in closing, thank you for joining Credit Union Digest. If you have additional questions for Diane, please see the link in her bio.